What's happening, everybody? The transfer portal is officially open again. We'll get you caught up on the latest names hitting the road. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. Great to have you guys along on today's show. We'll get you caught up on the latest new names to hit the transfer portal on Monday. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Okay, the transfer portal is officially open again. Portal opens today, April 16th, and will run through April 30th. So the door is open. You can hit the portal for football. This is what we're talking about, because I know there's been a lot of basketball stuff happening, but football, the portal is open once again. Now, SEC rules state that players who entered the portal from one SEC school in the spring cannot transfer to another SEC school. I know there were some people questioning, was that going to be fought because the NCAA and, they were going back and forth on the rules on the transfer portal and all this kind of stuff. As far as we know, the SEC is still enforcing that rule via Greg Sankey and the SEC office. So unless we hear otherwise, that's still the case. So if you are currently at an SEC school and you enter your name into the portal today or anytime in the next 2 weeks, as we understand it, you can't go to another SEC school and play immediately. You're going to have to do that thing where you sit out a year, unless you're a grad transfer or something like that. There's an exception, but the spring window will consist primarily of players who did not earn, starting roles at their prior schools, as well as grad transfers who are completing their degrees. This is what we're going to see a lot of guys entering the portal here these next 2 weeks. But again, if you're, for instance, a D lineman from Texas, this is where it gets really sketchy. Texas is still a Big 12 school right now. So if a D lineman from Texas enters the portal and wants to transfer an SEC school, I guess that's allowed. So anyway, there's a lot to dissect here, but let's get into it with some of the big names that have entered the transfer portal here Monday evening. And so we'll start over at Tennessee, as linebacker Elijah Herring has played his last down with the Tennessee Volunteers. He announced on social media Monday he is entering the transfer portal. He put out a statement, said, "I would like to thank Coach Josh Heupel and the University of Texas for the opportunity to play in my home state. I appreciate all the support from the entire staff, my teammates, fans, but I've decided to enter the transfer portal and pursue other college opportunities. Love the Vols." So Herring, he's from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, came to Rocky Top in January of 2022. He will have 2 seasons of eligibility remaining. Was a reserve linebacker and earned a spot on special teams in 2022 as a freshman, and then had a breakout sophomore season, taking on a starting role at middle linebacker. And Elijah Herring became Tennessee's top tackler last year with 80 tackles, including 4 tackles for a loss. And started 11 of 12 games this past season at middle linebacker. Helped the Vols to rank 3rd in the SEC and 23rd in the country this past season in scoring defense. Now, look, on the surface, you might say, all right, Tennessee's going to lose their leading tackler, and, what's going on here? But big thing to remember, he stepped in after Keenan Pili was hurt for the season with an injury. And with Pili set to come back, Herring isn't necessarily going to just automatically be a starter again. So Austin Price, who covers UT, he put on social media that Herring wants to be a starter, and he feels that opportunity somewhere else other than Tennessee. So again, Keenan Pili coming back, he's going to be the starting middle linebacker, and Herring will be moving on. But look, it's a sign that maybe, good news that Pili's coming back and it's going to be very good. But Tennessee coming off a 9-4 season, hoping for a big 4th year under Josh Heupel, and they need guys on defense. Need some guys who can lead in tackling and that sort of thing. So, on the surface, looks like, man, you're losing a piece of that defense. But Keenan Pili will be back at middle linebacker. And then I'm going to assume, Arian Carter, Jeremiah Thielander had some nice moments in the spring game the other day. Then on the line, you'll have James Pierce and so on and so forth. But and Edwin Spillman, by the way, had a nice spring game as well. So maybe the writing was on the wall there for Elijah Herring that wasn't going to play as much this year. So we'll see where he ends up. Another guy entering the transfer portal over at Arkansas, quarterback Jacolby Criswell. He spent the first 3 years of his collegiate career at North Carolina, transferred to Arkansas this past year. And, you knew KJ Jefferson, seemed like he was going into his last year at Arkansas last year. And so it was like, oh, okay, well, Criswell will go in and maybe earn that spot and be the heir apparent behind KJ Jefferson. Well, he made 4 appearances in his lone season with the Razorbacks, 17 completions for 143 yards, 3 touchdowns, at a 63% completion rate. But in 3 seasons with the Tar Heels, played in 15 games there. Played high school football in the state of Arkansas, where he was a 4-star prospect. So made sense for him to come back home, but it was just a big debacle last year at Arkansas. The whole Dan Enos experiment, they ended up firing him, and it was just a mess. But Arkansas going to be moving on. And look, they hit the transfer portal this offseason and brought in Taylen Green. I mean, the weird thing is KJ Jefferson had a rough year. He hits the portal. He ends up over at UCF. He's going to play for Gus Malzahn this year. But Taylen Green coming over from Boise State, he has been very impressive for Arkansas and appears to be QB1. And so now, Criswell was in a battle for the backup spot at Arkansas. And so he will look to move on elsewhere. He's the 26th Arkansas player to enter the transfer portal during or since the conclusion of this past season. They have added 13 players via the portal, but we'll see where Jacolby Criswell ends up. Sam Pittman did say earlier this week his attitude towards the transfer portal. He said, we don't want to lose any of our players. And I had to talk with our team and say, hey, we just don't lose anybody that we have and don't add anybody. We're going to have a fine football team. So the number one thing is I don't want to lose anybody. Well, Sam Pittman already losing somebody. Jacolby Criswell hitting the transfer portal. And one more in here over at Texas A&M. Linebacker Alex Howard announced he is entering the transfer portal. We'll have, of course, 2 weeks to decide where he wants to end up. But he was a grad transfer who came in from Youngstown State, was expected to compete for a starting role opposite their breakout freshman from last year, Torian York. And Alex Howard was one of the first players offered a scholarship following the hiring of Mike Elko from Duke. But the Aggies hired Florida's Jay Bateman as their new defensive coordinator. And after that, several Gators elected to follow him to College Station, including linebacker Scooby Williams. And Williams has seen the bulk of the first team snaps, splitting duties with rising sophomore Damian Sanford. So it seemed unlikely that Howard would be taking starting reps. That season opener against Notre Dame is coming very quickly. It will be August 31st. But so Alex Howard entering the transfer portal again. 5 seasons at Youngstown State. Served as one of the top tacklers in the Missouri Valley Conference, totaling 142 tackles there. Last season, finished with 76 tackles, 9.5 tackles for a loss. Entered the transfer portal back in December and then announced he was coming to A&M, but he is on the move again. The Aggies will have 7 linebackers for this upcoming season with Torian York, Williams, Sanford. You'll have junior Martrell Harris, sophomore Chance Johnson, incoming freshman Jordan Lockhart, and Tristan Jernigan. Aggies, by the way, will play their spring game this coming Saturday, so we'll get a look at what they look like this spring. So there you have it. Those are 3 names so far in the mix. I get it. They're not all headliners. They're not all big, huge names that get you excited. But coming up next, we'll hit on a few more names that hit the transfer portal from the SEC yesterday. Again, the portal's open. Who do you want your team to get? We'll talk a little bit more on the transfer portal in just a sec. But first, I want to remind you guys, this episode presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel. It is playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from home runs to slam dunks, slap shots, whatever it is, all on an app that is safe and secure and super easy to use. What are you waiting for? Go get signed up today. If you never signed up before, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon is the place you want to go, and go get your bet made and become a member, and you can get in on the action. Make your first bet an automatic win. Again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get signed up today. Is FanDuel. They are America's #1 sports book. Check them out today. Hey, also remind you this episode is presented to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. We are becoming big fans of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It has been downloaded over 150 million times. It is a great twist on Monopoly, where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with your friends. You could charge them rent on the iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. But now you can also rob their vaults of riches for yourself. And the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. So it's not just your competitive side that loves it. You can team up with your friends and people around you in the world in time tournaments to earn huge awards, so you get back in the game and join your friends. Again, it is Monopoly Go. Go check them out today, and very cool stuff. Monopoly Go, you can download it today for free on the App Store. Monopoly Go, that is the place you want to go. And if you're watching on video here, there we go. Download Monopoly Go free on the App Store and Google Play. All right, diving back into it. I want to remind you guys, it's Locked On's NFL Mock Draft Live, coming to you April 17th. Coming to you this week, streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series starting April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern to hear who our local Locked On, try saying that 5 times fast, experts are picking for every NFL franchise with live reaction. It's Locked On NFL Mock Draft, April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern. There you go. All right, let's dive back into it as we're talking about some of the transfer portal stuff and teams that are losing players here. And we head on over to Georgia next, as on Monday, Georgia running back Andrew Paul announced he is entering the transfer portal. He spent 2 seasons with the Bulldogs, redshirted his true freshman season after he suffered a knee injury in the preseason. But in 2023, he made 7 appearances as a reserve running back in his limited time on the field, 29 carries, 129 yards, and a touchdown. Andrew Paul played his high school football in the state of Texas, was a 3-star prospect, the number 432 overall recruit in 2020. Kirby Smart talked about Paul last season, said he really improved tremendously in his pass protection, picking people up. He's thick, he's heavy. We got some guys that we feel that are different than him in terms of weapons. We feel like Andrew's done a good job and continuing to improve. Kendall Milton was also very complimentary of him, among others. So Paul becomes the 22nd Georgia player to enter the transfer portal following last season, and the program has added 7 players to their portal additions. But Andrew Paul, somewhat productive running back there at Georgia, and we'll see where he ends up entering the transfer portal. Also saw last night Georgia wide receiver Braxton Lee Hicks. He announced he's going to enter the transfer portal as a grad transfer. Said he will have 2 years of eligibility remaining there. Over at Vanderbilt, wide receiver Josh Palmer announced his intentions to enter the transfer portal on Monday. Clark Lee had previously said a decision on whether Palmer will remain with the team or not would come within the next week, so we now know that answer. He is originally from Selma, Alabama, redshirted last year, appeared in one game, recorded no stats. He did convert from tight end to wide receiver for spring ball, but just struggled to find his way on the depth chart. It was funny. I was looking back on his recruiting profile, and I was like, wait, I can't find wide receiver Josh Palmer. It's because he was a tight end. So former tight end turned wide receiver Josh Palmer. We'll see where he ends up. He will have 4 years of eligibility remaining. Also, another guy from Vanderbilt entering the portal, linebacker Dante Kelly, announced on social media. He will enter the transfer portal, 6'3", 200-pound linebacker from the state of Mississippi. Originally chose Vanderbilt after decommitting from Mississippi State. Did not appear in a game last year. He will have 4 years of eligibility remaining. So see if he ends up at Mississippi State. I mean, it's where he was originally committed. Of course, it was with the previous coaching staff there. So we'll watch for Dante Kelly, see where he ends up. So those are kind of the SEC guys. Now it gets a little awkward because we're talking about Big 12 guys that are going to be playing or would have been playing in the SEC next year. But Texas defensive end Billy Walton has entered the transfer portal. He'll have 4 years of eligibility remaining. He's 6'3", 230 pounds, was a true freshman this past year. Did not record any stats for the Longhorns in his lone season in Austin. He did appear in 2 games, was one of 16 true freshmen to qualify for a red shirt, but was a 3-star recruit prior to college, the number 488 player in the class of 2023, the number 42 edge. He did have offers from the likes of Texas A&M, Tennessee, and others. And you got to wonder, would he consider making the jump from Texas to Texas A&M? That would certainly, be something that would get the juices going there. Some other guys from Texas, freshman linebacker S'Maje Burrell. Steve Sarkisian said he would make a decision on if he would be suspended indefinitely. And then he just announced he is going to enter the transfer portal. So S'Maje Burrell, freshman linebacker, we'll see where he ends up entering the portal. And then Texas offensive lineman Payton Kirkland, he's going to enter the transfer portal, was a 3-star prospect, the number 30 offensive tackle in the class of 2023. He had offers from Florida, Miami, Florida State. Did not appear in a game last season with the Longhorns. Missed practice time last season as he was dealing with an injury. So we'll see where he ends up. So those were some guys from University of Texas to hit the transfer portal. A few other notes here. Some SEC guys that just recently entered the transfer portal here in the last couple weeks. We saw Kentucky running back Lavelle Wright, Arkansas tight end Francis Sherman, Texas running back Darian Brown, Oklahoma linebacker Connor Neer, and South Carolina defensive lineman Terrell Dawkins. So those are just some of the names. Again, I get it. These aren't all household names and names we all know from across the SEC on a regular basis, but the transfer portal's open. Look, there's going to be tons of big names flying in there in the next 24, 48, 72 hours. So we'll be catching you up to date on all of those. Still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And we do need to mention about Arkansas is moving their season opener. That came out amidst all the news of the spring games and all the craziness happening over the weekend. So we're going to touch on that coming up next right here on Locked On SEC. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I first want to remind you guys this episode is presented to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. Look, when you are hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They're going to help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Go hire professionals like a professional, and you can do that on LinkedIn Jobs. But go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Go post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. right, roll along here, locked on SEC. And hey, we're going to get to that Arkansas news here in just a minute on their season opener. But I did want to dive back into a little bit on the transfer portal news and notes. Our friend Jesse Simonton over at On3 Sports put up a pretty good piece I was reading last night and kind of hit on some of the big contenders, teams that he thinks are going to be big contenders this year across the country and particularly in the SEC. And he talked about what their biggest needs are that they need to address in the portal. So just figured we'd touch on some of these real quickly and just kind of running through them. He mentions Georgia Bulldogs. He thinks defensive tackle is a spot that they need to address to solidify themselves as a title contender. And he said, Georgia flirted with Walter Nolan, who ended up at Ole Miss, LT Overton at Alabama. They did bring in Xavier McLeod from South Carolina, who had a strong spring, but they still need more depth there. So Georgia defensive tackle, we'll see what they do. He brings up the Texas Longhorns, says that like Georgia, they could use another interior body there on the defensive tackle. They did add a big defensive end in Trey Moore coming over from UTSA, guy who can get a bunch of sacks, but need some big bodies there on the interior. How about over at Alabama, Kalen DeBoer? What do they need to add in the portal? Well, secondary help. Crimson Tide replacing 4 key starters, Terrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Jalen Key, and Caleb Downs. One notable backup, Trey Amos. So they need depth there. And they do have some nice recruits that they've brought in. Obviously, they brought in Damani Jackson through the portal from USC, Keon Sabb from Michigan. But safety Malachi Moore is the lone DB with multiple seasons of starting experience. So they could use some depth there and some veteran leadership there in the secondary. How about over at LSU? He says Brian Kelly's already on record that the Tigers will add defensive tackle depth when the portal opens because they're losing Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo, Jacobian Guillory, Jalen Lee. So they need dudes there. But he says anything on defense will help LSU. They could use secondary. They could use D-line help. They could use whatever. So we'll see what Brian Kelly opts to do. How about over at Ole Miss? He says Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss need a running back. They added a trio of offensive linemen. They added a stud wideout in Juice Wells. They've added just about every piece in the portal, but they're losing star tailback Quinshon Judkins, who left for Ohio State. They did reportedly bring in Henry Parrish back from Miami. Started his career at Ole Miss originally, but they could be a natural fit for Damian Martinez from Oregon State. That's one of the places that, they're saying that, could be a landing spot for him. So we'll see what happens there. So there you have it. That is going to do it here on the transfer portal edition of Things Happening. And one other piece we just want to add in here before we call it a show over at Arkansas. Razorbacks season is shifted to a Thursday night matchup just before the Labor Day weekend. They changed like this would possibly get underneath the skin of some head coaches, but cannot be said for Sam Pittman moving a game to Thursday night showdown. Sam Pittman saying, you look at a few things when you go to Little Rock, and number one, you really don't want to take away from great football. So you don't take away from Friday Night Lights. If you play in September, then what time do you want to play the game? So benefit for the Razorbacks hosting a night game is the opportunity to avoid the southern heat, he said, which could be a nightmare to deal with in August. He said, so everybody in Little Rock probably wants to play the game at night because it's so dang hot. Well, if you play at night, then if it's not a home game, we get 3 o'clock in the morning. It's always early in the year. Number one, it's a night game, so folks will be able to tailgate and won't be as hot on our guys, and you gain 2 days on your next opponent. So Sam Pittman saying it was the right decision. So Arkansas will kick off the 2024 season August 29th against the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. So going to be fun to see Arkansas as one of the early teams playing on Thursday night football for the Hogs to kick off the season. Now, by the way, one other nugget on Arkansas, they did lose redshirt freshman wide receiver Davion Dozier suffered a broken wrist during Saturday's spring game. You never want to see a guy get hurt in a spring game, but he was reportedly having a solid spring after redshirting his true freshman year in Fayetteville. Appeared in one game last year. Pittman did not provide an injury timetable for Dozier, but we will wish him a speedy recovery, see when he gets back out there. But again, mark your calendars. Thursday, August 29th, Arkansas versus Arkansas Pine Bluff will kick off one of the SEC teams and their season in 2024. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to you guys for coming and checking us out. We'll have you more of the biggest names in transfer portal, and I'm sure bigger and badder stuff going to be happening here in the next 24 hours across the SEC. But hey, for your second listen, go check out Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering all the top sports stories of the day. You can find that on YouTube or Amazon Fire app. So go check that out wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Chris Gordon. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.